We are now live, Chair.
Thank you very much, and welcome everybody on screen and everybody who's watching by video to the Calderdale Council Flood Recovery and Resilience Programme Board. Yesterday I was with Trudy Harrison MP, who came up to Bradford to launch a whole series of projects across the country of nature recovery. She's the Minister for Environment and Natural Environment and Land Use, and one of the projects is in Bradford. And it was very, very good. Tony Juniper, the chair of Natural England, and Marion Spain from Natural England were there as well. And we were delighted to welcome them in the north of England. And I did a very short speech as part of the panel. And one of the things I talked about was the relationship between nature recovery and flooding, and the experience that we have in being resilient to flooding and adapting to flooding, and how important that is to nature recovery. So I was strong in the message of Calderdale and our role, and I did invite the Minister and others to come and see what we do. So let's hope they take us up on that. Moving on to the main agenda that we've got in front of us, folks. Item 1 is substitutes nominated for this meeting, and apologies for absence. Kirsty or Diane?
It's me, Chair. I'm clerking for you today. We have apologies from Councillor Dickinson, but have not been sent any substitutes.
Right. No other apologies. Thank you very much. Okay, admission of the public. It's not recommended that the public be excluded from the meeting for any items on the agenda. Minutes.
Sorry, Chair, you've missed members' interests.
Indeed, I have. Thank you. Yeah, have to keep me on the straight and narrow, Diane. Thank you. Members' interests. I need to remind members to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests or other interests they might have in relation to the items included on the agenda. Can I, Diane's reminder is very timely because I am affected personally by flooding works in relation to the Errington Hillside scheme, the Hebden Ridge scheme. But as I've said in previous declarations of interests, I do intend to stay in the meeting and contribute. And I think in some ways we are all very much affected and have an interest in the flooding schemes in Calderdale. Thank you. Admission of the public, as I said before, not excluded from any part of the meeting. If we move on to item 4, minutes of the meeting held on the 24th of March. Are members of the committee content that there should be agreed as a correct record? I'm taking silence as consent. Councillor
Yes.
has indicated. If I move them, he's happy to second them, and that's agreed. Thank you. Right. Shall we move on then to the substantive items? And I've got item 5, Flood Risk Reduction and Investment Group, the Environment Agency report, and that's pages 11 to 18 in your pack. And I'm not quite sure who within the Environment Agency. Is that you, Paul?
Yes, it is, Chair. Thank you. Before I start, I suppose I need to introduce Christian for those who don't know him. He's my sidekick today because unfortunately our line manager Joe Arnold can't be with us today. So Christian will be able to answer questions that you may have on some of the schemes that he leads on. But I'll go through the report now. So some of the highlights I wanted to touch on briefly around that back in April now, so a couple of months ago, we were very successful in a new funding bid for the frequently flooding allowance, which was a new category of granting aid funding from central government. And we put forward a number of projects for this funding. And we got nearly £12 million for Calderdale projects, which was fantastic. I think it was one of the biggest allocations across the country. So some good work behind the scenes to get that. Then a second highlight is around Brighouse. So the planning application for that now for the Wellown Park and Winnie Park has been granted, which is fantastic news. And I'll touch on Brighouse a little bit later. Some other great news for Burnley Road Academy in Mytholmroyd. Works have started there now. So a lot of the off-the-shelf products, like the puddle pumps, non-return valves, air brick covers, that sort of work has been installed. It was installed over the May half term. Then other great news, we've finally got the keys for the flood information hub in Hebden Bridge, and the team have been working very hard to clean it up, because it was a bit of a state when we got in there, and make it look very presentable. And in the next couple of weeks, sort of in August time, it'll be open to the public on, I believe, Mondays and Fridays, sort of 10 till 2. And then final bit, which isn't in your pack, is hot off the press that there's going to be the annual flood siren test, and that date is going to be the Thursday, the 28th of September. So that's where we test the 7 or 8, I think it's 8 sirens through the Calder Valley. More comms will come out on that in due course. I'm sure we're working with the council on that. Very much weather dependent, of course. If it's inclement weather and river levels are due to rise, then we won't do it, but we'll take that view close to the time. So project updates, a little bit more detail now. I keep saying that I'm not going to talk about Mytholmroyd anymore at each of these meetings, but there's one final thing I need to say on Mytholmroyd now, that the scour protection works that were to be completed behind White Houses, they were completed with minimal disruption. So that was the scour protection works back in April. So essentially the Mytholmroyd flood alleviation scheme now is totally complete. So I won't touch on it anymore. I try and promise that. I did mention just then in the highlights that Burnley Road Academy is well underway. The outstanding items now are the bespoke flood barriers and walls. They've been ordered and are programmed to start imminently during the school summer holidays, and that work is due to be completed when the school reopens in early September. Second project, Hebden Bridge. If there's any questions on that, like I said, Christian will be able to answer those.
Paul, can I just pause you there?
Yeah.
Councillor Patient has indicated to come in.
It's fine, Leader. I'll wait until the end of the presentation. Sorry, it's been a bit previous.
Just checking you weren't declaring an interest or anything like that. Okay, so you've got your hand up early there. I do note that. Okay, Paul, carry on. Okay,
so Hebden Bridge. So the fluvial design for Hebden Bridge, it's really progressing well now, and the design packs are being finalised and being reviewed, and that is due for completion in this month. The planning submission is due during the winter of 2023, so probably in the next 5 months or so that'll be in. And the team are continually to review the costs as well, due to material costs being constantly increasing, it seems, and the cost of living crisis, which never seems to end at the moment, and so the team are working really hard to keep those costs in check for the Hebden Bridge scheme. I've already mentioned that the hub is going to be opened in the next few weeks, which is great news. That's really positive for the community to come in and ask any questions that they have, in particular on the Hebden Bridge scheme, Errington scheme, Canal Overflow and Stubbinholme Road. But that's not to say that they can't come in and ask about the wider projects throughout the valley as well. The surface water design element, the integrated catchment model that's been completed now shows that we don't actually have to have the scale of the system that was originally intended, so it can be reduced in places. So a smaller collection system and smaller pumping station, which again will be more efficient, less costly than originally envisaged. The ground investigation works, I think, went relatively smoothly in Hebden Bridge over the last couple of months. I think a lot of positive comms went out early on. There was still traffic disruption inevitably, but I think it was managed pretty well, and I don't believe the team got too many complaints. And there'll be some more further work later in the summer to do with the trial pits, because there's quite an extensive programme of those works. And you can actually view the information on a really good Google map by the Eye on Calderdale website. And then environmental update for Hebden Bridge. So they're looking at outline design for Calder Holmes Park at the moment, and particularly modification to the existing embankment there. Erringdon Hillside, I'll move on to Erringdon Hillside. This project has changed a little bit over the last few months, but now the team are working around looking at options, including property flood resilience. So that's similar to what I talked about with Burnley Road Academy. So your flood doors, your barriers, your air brick covers. But then also in combination with that is looking at different highway interventions as well to manage the surface water runoff from the hillside, particularly at Fairfield, Shelf Road and Hebble End. And working with it, and I think the team are working really closely with Calderdale Council Highways Department on that aspect. And then also the team are working closely with the Calder and Colne Rivers Trust around the sort of the natural flood management solutions for this area. So basically it's a bit of a suite of options for Erringdon: property flood resilience, highway drainage improvements, and some natural flood management solutions. Moving on to Stubbinholme Road. Detailed design work is nearly complete, finally. It seems to have been going on for some time. But a lot of we've undertaken quite a few trial pits, particularly along Stubbinholme Road, to find out where all the services are, and that's informed our design. And I think that went relatively smoothly as well, I understand. The team have been working closely with all the utility providers as well, and trying to minimise the disruption as much as possible over that very constrained road at Stubbinholme Road. And we're also looking at trying to improve the drainage down there as well, and worked again with Calderdale Council Highways to consolidate that bit of work and provide a more robust and resilient design down there. One of the main bit of works that the team have been doing recently is around trying to explore the construction methodology. Stubbinholme Road, 80 to 90% of the work is all the work directly adjacent to Stubbinholme Road. So that long length of wall, we call it Wall A, and trying to make it the most cost efficient and least disruptive method of work for that area, because it will be disruptive, there's no doubt about it, but we're trying to minimize that as much as possible, and we're costing those different solutions at the moment, and once that's done, then we'll be able to finalize that design and move forward and get it priced as a whole project. A lot of the environmental deliverables have now been passed to the team as well to review, which includes the heritage-based desk assessment, listed building consent and a biodiversity net gain assessment. They're being reviewed. And I've said it many times now, but before we submit any planning application, we will be going out doing a public consultation event, hopefully later this year. That's the current plan. And then start on site in early 2024. That's the current plan that we envisage. Reservoir storage, there's not much to say on the reservoir storage project. It's been a bit of a challenge around procuring the Yorkshire Water Resource, I believe, to undertake this yield analysis, because I know I'm speaking on behalf of Yorkshire Water now, but I know they've been very much focused on the drought work. But it's still a project at the forefront of national reservoir utilisation. So it's still a project that we're still passionate about completing, but it's unfortunately been paused at the minute due to a bit of lack of resource. But I'll let Christian and maybe Yorkshire Water follow up on that if there's any further questions. The next project, Park Road, Elland, a scope has been agreed now with Arup to look at the different sources of flooding in the area and look at the try and find an economically viable solution. We envisage this bit of work will take about 6 months to complete, and are working with Calderdale Council to carry out some dye testing to find out where the water actually does go, and Yorkshire Water also compiling their information that they have on their network, and basically this will make us try and find a solution that works, that's cost effective and reduces risk from all sources of flooding. Copley Village, so I think I touched on it last time, but the preferred solution here, so we've currently submitted the outline business case, so we know what our preferred option is. It's sheet piling the existing embankment that surrounds the village. There's a drainage solution on the cricket field to ensure that that area drains quicker so it doesn't go through the network rail embankment. And then there's also some street furniture in the village itself to lessen the effect of surface water flows coming down Copley Lane, and then channel it back through the rugby field car park. So that's the preferred solution. That's what we're going for. But we're also trying, and we're very hopeful of bringing forward the main bit of the works, which is the sheet piled work along the existing embankment, because that is permitted development, so we can carry that out without planning permission. The other elements do require planning permission, so we're hopeful we're going to start this work during late summer, early autumn this year, which is great news for the village because they'll be getting better protected sooner rather than later. Another positive for this project, we've now held 2 stakeholder meetings that have been very, very well received. So we've got the right people around the room, and we're taking on some of their thoughts and ideas as well. The next project, Shorewood Road, a small project, but nonetheless no less important than the others. This is imminent now. It should have been imminent probably back in the spring. However, we've had some challenges, but we're nearly there. We're now finalising the permit to do the works, so we should have that back in 2 weeks, and it'll take about 2 weeks for our delivery partner to mobilise. So come sort of mid-August time, I would say, mid to late August, we'll be on site to construct a small new wall behind a garage and better protect 17 properties in Shorewood Road. Again, we'll be going out with some comms around this for the local residents. There aren't many, but there shouldn't be too much disruption for them. There shouldn't be any or very little traffic disruption as well. We don't need any traffic management there. So in theory, it should be the next completed scheme in the next few months, which is great news. Hebblebrook, moving on again, a detailed design pack, and the challenge around Hebblebrook has been the sewer diversion. So I've been working hard with Yorkshire Water colleagues around this, and now I believe the detailed design pack now has been submitted to our delivery partner BAM, who now will be going out to tender with the Yorkshire Water suppliers to undertake this sewer diversion works. And we're looking for this bit of work to start now in April next year. Moving on to Walsden flood alleviation scheme. So I think I mentioned this, but Walsden, very complicated catchment, lots of different inflows. There's no one solution to Walsden. It needs to really be quite a large suite of solutions to better protect the village. The original estimated cost for Walsden for the preferred option was more actually than the overall benefit, so it turned out that we didn't have a viable scheme. However, behind the scenes, the team have been working very hard to get an economically viable scheme, and I'm pleased to say that we now do. The benefits outweigh the costs. However, the challenge we've now got is around quite a significant funding shortfall of around £20 million, but we are working quite hard very hard to reduce that gap, and we've got a few, for want of a better term, irons in the fire to get or to close that gap, because it is that 20 million is significant. But like I say, we've got different avenues to explore, and all is certainly not lost. And another major positive is around quite a large landholder that we're liaising with now around potentially having NFM solutions on their land. So working with Sally Kellen in my team around that, and Ben Fenton, I'm sure you'll be involved in this at some point too. So that's about it for Walsden. Sorby Bridge. Modelling's continuing this. We need a strong evidence base because we don't have it at the minute. So that work is now started. We'll be looking to undertake some survey work around Sorby Bridge. So if anyone sees anyone in high-vis jackets over the next few months, that's probably what they'll be doing. Surveying the channel, surveying wall heights, and surveying thresholds of properties, businesses, etc. Because until we have a strong evidence base for Sorby Bridge, we can't move forward. And that strong evidence base will lead into options to better protect Sorby. And whether that's wall raising, storage upstream, don't know. Nothing's off the table yet. Brighouse, I mentioned that briefly before. Planning application has been granted, which is great news. A lot of the maintenance works or maintenance improvement works to the walls in Brighouse have been completed, with over 50 businesses now better protected. The works to the parks will start, or look to start, in early 2024 to hopefully beat the poor weather over Christmas. But both parks will be out of action during the construction phase, and that's going to be likely to be 2 years, so that's going to have quite a large impact on the community. But the team, I know, are working hard to put an engagement plan together, and I think they held their first stakeholder meeting only a couple of weeks ago, I believe, and I think it was positively received, with lots of different stakeholders in attendance. Then Backwaterloo in Todmorden, the penultimate scheme that I'll touch on. We're working with our consultants, Arup, to deliver an outline business case or find a preferred option. We do need to undertake some small modelling, or a small modelling exercise. We also need to undertake a bit of survey work to see if the channel has changed, because this is Backwaterloo, if you're not familiar, is the one where historic works have caused significant scour to the channel and some of the channel sides, which we need to address because previous options have been unsuccessful. So we need a more long-term solution here. So like I say, we're going to be undertaking survey work, some modelling work, again, to look at finding a preferred option. And then the final one, last but not least, is Callis Bridge, which one I'm heavily involved with. Arup have now completed their data review. I've reviewed their data review, gone back with some comments. But now once that is approved, we'll start progressing the next stage of the business case. Again, looking at a project that reduces flood risk from all sources rather than just the River Calder, which the previous scheme back in the early 2000s looked at only, unfortunately. But yeah, we'll look at groundwater, sewer flooding, surface water flooding, non-main river canal. Basically, Callis gets it all, and we're going to try and look at reducing it from all sources if we can. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. There was a tremendous amount there. Thank you. I've got one or two comments, but I'm going to take Councillor Patient and then Councillor Lee. Scott?
Thank you, Chair, and thanks, Paul. That's really helpful and a deep dive into what's going on. I'll try and keep my than right talk to a minimum and resist the urge to be parochial. However, I think it's probably worth mentioning, you know, the work that's happening, and I don't need to declare an interest anymore because none of my kids go there. The work going on in Burnley Road Academy has been really well received by the head and chair of governors there, who I've been speaking to. They've been really impressed with the contractors doing the work, and actually the scope of works is quite astronomical, really. What's going on there when you see it, and I think actually the finished article will be really impressive. It'd be good to get some proactive comms about that out there, because people are passing it. Some of it's quite visible already, so maybe that's something as we move to the comms plan later on that could be worked out. There's just a couple of comments and a question. Really good to see the breadth of projects that the Combined Authority are supporting at the Climate, Energy and Environment Committee. Over half of them mentioned, over half of the funded ones are within Calderdale, and that's within the whole of the Combined Authority. So I think that's really impressive and testament to the collaborative work and strength of the projects and what they hope to achieve. Also mention of the lesser spotted Mythenroyd Fast 2 in there that, a little bit down the line, but I'm seeing more frequently referenced in, public sort of facing places. So it might be good at some point in the future to have an understanding about that and what's going on. And then just a sort of reflection, really, which is it's been quite pleasing to see NFM getting, a lot more of a shining star in these projects as things go forward. And I think that's going to be absolutely key to delivery and for the Environment Agency's own 2030 net zero targets, to make sure that we ramp up NFM as and where practical across the board. So just a few bits there, but I hope that's okay.
Thank you. I'm going to take Councillor Lee as well and make a couple of comments myself. I'm just looking to see if there's anybody else indicating. Not at the moment. And then I'm going to come back to Paul to respond to the points. Councillor Lee, Stephen.
Thank you, Chair. One overriding point that I want to make is that, as you're aware, Chair, the Council has recently passed an all-party motion, it ended up, about doing something about dumping raw sewage in the rivers of Calderdale. And I mentioned that first because I think there's some relevance to the flooding implications of this raw sewage. So first of all, Paul, a great report. It's so good to know that a lot of work is being done, and it's gratifying to be part of this group to talk about it. But it's occurred to me that a lot of the work that's being done to alleviate flooding and incidents of flooding, it's great, but coming back to the raw sewage, the time that this is allowed to be dumped in the rivers is at times, paradoxically, I think, of high rainfall. And it just occurred to me that, if some of these places are going to get flooded, surely the dumping of this raw sewage only makes it worse for all of the people that are going to be flooded, because it's more likely to be tainted with this sewage than at quieter times, let us say. So it's not good that it's happening. And I can see Councillor Patient looking shocked. I don't think they're allowed to dump it when it,
I was just coughing, Councillor.
All right, well, sorry. Bless you. Okay, so it is relevant, and we're dumping the sewage just at a time when we don't want to contaminate the water that could flood somebody anymore at all. So there's that, and I don't know how we deal with it, but I do know that in my ward, Ripon Sewage Works has been cited as being one of the top offenders in the country for the frequency of dumping sewage. And that's my ward. But my heart goes out to Salby Bridge and Brighouse that were just talked about, because they're not very far. Well, Salby Bridge is almost on top of it. They're getting all that stuff which is at record levels, and it doesn't help. And we need to get a grip of the whole of this concept now, I think, particularly since the council said they're going to do something about it. The second point, Chair, is this is my concern. Paul mentioned passionate about reservoir storage. I've been involved in this as councillor for bit over 5 years. But earlier than that, in my previous role at the Chamber of Commerce, we were talking about this. And so for the last 5, 8 years, it's been talked about. And to my knowledge, nothing has been done. All I hear at all the meetings that I attend on this is everybody's passionate about it, but nothing is done again. And it's hoped that it'll go away for another year. And that's about it. I would just say on the funding gap of 20 million, it's interesting that, and I accept Scott Patient's comment that we do very well, in getting the allocation at Wicklow level. But this funding is government funding. And on page 11 of the report, it's headed up as Wicklow funding of £2 million has been provided. It only then goes on to say that it's been channeled from DEFRA. And of course, DEFRA is a government agency. So it seems that when there's a gap in funding, it's the government's fault. And when the funding is actually provided by the government, it's attributed to somebody local. That's it, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Lee. Just before I ask Paul to respond, and I may also bring in Adam, because of course some of the points that you raised, actually the Environment Agency has a regulatory and enforcement role, and Yorkshire Water is a water company that has a responsibility with relations to sewage. I just wanted to add into the list for you to respond to, Paul. First of all, thank you for a very comprehensive report. Thought it was interesting what you said in terms of Calais and the area around Calais. I've said in previous meetings here that Calais is in the canary in the coal mine. Those of us who are in the Upper Valley always look and see what's happening in Calais. And if Calais is bad, then you know that if the road starts to be closed, it has an impact on the local economy as well as the distress to residents. I wanted to check, I think you gave partial reassurance, I wanted to check that the Friends of the Park group, I know there's one in Wellholme, I don't know if there's one in Winnie Hill, but that they are properly involved. And I wonder if perhaps there's also a bit of information role in relation to the Brickhouse Town Board and the bid, in terms of making sure people do know going forward what the plans are there. Very pleased to see a bit of attention being given to Sorby Bridge. And actually overall, in terms of your report, it is really good to see work up and down the whole of the borough, really, being perhaps more evenly spread than when we were first initially responding to the very bad events of 2015. I think in terms of the reservoirs, I mean, clearly the Environment Agency has a particular role, but once again, I'm looking to Adam in terms of Yorkshire Water, in terms of just thinking about some of the behind the scenes work I know that's been going on nationally, actually, to look at those things. And I was interested in whether the work that's going on in Lincolnshire at the moment in relation to new reservoirs in Lincolnshire, which is almost unheard of in this country in recent decades. And I would be interested to know if there's any lessons that can be learned for us in terms of very different topography. So Paul and possibly Adam, in terms of responding to the points that have been made. Thank you.
Thanks, Chair. I'll start, but I will definitely be bringing in Adam and probably Christian to respond to some of the comments, because I'm afraid I can't. Right, so going back to Councillor Patient's first comment, yeah, Burnley Road Academy, we definitely need to be proactive on some comms around that, because like you say, I've been thoroughly impressed with the contractors that have been there, who are watertight, they're called. Yeah, they've been very proactive, come up with new ideas which weren't previously thought about, and just out of interest, we'll be showing around the Department for Education in August as well. They're going to have a bit of a tour of what's planned there, and the main scheme as well. But yes, a bit of a flagship project, this one, so one we really want to shout about. Mythenroyd Phase 2, I think you mentioned. Yeah, I can provide some more information at a later date. There isn't much, to be honest, at the minute. It's a it's a project in our program, so not to be forgotten about. But you're right, it is becoming more visible, and one that we do need to start looking at some point. But we've got a lot. I've gone through the list of what we're on with at the minute. So it's there. So it's one to talk about in the future, definitely. But I can let you know in more detail what the thoughts are around that project. I'll touch on Councillor Scullion's points first, if you don't mind. So Callis, yes, I'm glad you're pleased that it's being looked at, but like you say, it's when that road floods, you know we're in trouble, because it's the first point that the Calder Valley seems to experience flooding. So one that I'm very passionate about looking at in more detail. In terms of the Friends, I didn't quite, was it Well-Owned Park, the Friends of the Park, those groups? Can't comment on that. I suspect we are speaking to them, but I will get back to you on that because Joe Arnold leads on that project, but I have no doubt Joe will be talking to them, and along with the town board as well, but I'll take an action to feed that one. Lincolnshire Reservoir, I don't know much about that one, so I can't comment, but maybe that's one that Adam perhaps can with his colleagues in Lincolnshire. I know it's at Severn Trent Water, maybe. Right, I'm going to Teflon the next ones around the sewer flooding and reservoir storage. So maybe Adam, you want to come in on the sewer flooding and combinations when the river levels are high and discharging sewage.
Yeah, I can pick up some of that. But I must apologise. I'm not so familiar with the reservoir in Lincolnshire. But if I can start with the reservoirs, if that's okay. So we had a session earlier this week with a former colleague, Granville Davis, who used to be part of the group here. And I do know that Granville's been heavily involved in a lot of work over the recent years in terms of organising the drawdown activity on the reservoirs in the valley there. And we're starting to look at that again for this coming year. So there's a lot to take into account. Obviously, those reservoirs are there to provide compensation and to allow for abstraction for water supply, but they can also provide some flood protection as well. The key requirement is around our water resources planning and then looking ahead to drought forecasting. So there is some work that we need to do in advance of a decision on how we face into that. Obviously, the rains and the recharge that we've had over the last week help that situation. But yeah, we will be looking at that again for the year ahead to understand how we can make effect of that. Granville mentioned that last year that the reservoirs were lower anyway, so the 10% headroom activity was achieved just by nature. And yeah, I think nature is probably the way that will solve a lot of the challenges that we've talked about this morning. So that is reservoirs. We don't have any plans as yet to build any reservoirs, although Granville also mentioned that he found a very historic document outlining designs for a further reservoir. So we could always dig that back out and have a look. In terms of the storm overflows, so this is a really publicised topic at the moment now. Just to sort of build on that a little bit. So yes, the release of storm effluent, it absolutely occurs during periods of high rainfall. So the CSO, the combined sewer overflow, is designed to be a pressure relief valve on combined sewers. So when you get a lot of rainfall, it drains through the combined sewer, and then to prevent properties and businesses from flooding, those sewer overflows are permitted to discharge into rivers. Now that's a feature and a design of the combined sewer network, and we have a plan to start to remove those. Now there's a lot of them, and that plan has started. So we've got money to spend over the next 2 years, including this year, removing some of our highest discharging storm overflows. And then we've got a plan that we're submitting to our regulator to continue to do that over the next 5 years. And then the plan continues to go beyond to deal with all storm overflows. So absolutely removing removing storm overflows reduces the discharge of that storm effluent to the watercourse. We actually, see the partnership working opportunity in areas like this as a way to deal with that through nature-based solutions. And we've been doing some really good work in other parts of the county where we've been able to remove surface water from those combined sewers, attenuating that at source. So things like small interventions like water butts on houses, through to rainwater gardens and sustainable urban drainage systems can attenuate the flow to an extent where it takes the peak of that discharge out of the combined sewer and actually vastly reduces the number of times that surface combined sewer overflow operates to really good effect. So it's absolutely something that we're looking at, and we will be continuing to focus on. So lots of huge focus for our business, something that we absolutely want to get right.
Thank you. Anything to come back, Paul or Christian?
Nothing from me, Chair, unless Christian wants to add anything more on the reservoir storage project.
Probably not too much more. I think probably kind of just sort of echo what Adam has said. Obviously, the last few years, Yorkshire Water have committed to that annual drawdown, and hopefully that's something that we can kind of carry on whilst we develop the options for the scheme. In terms of the kind of work done so far, we know sort of from our modelling and detailed hydraulic analysis that if we kind of focus on the Hebden group of reservoirs, we have a solution that substantially reduces flood risk for areas in Hebden, Mythen, Roy, Brighouse, in combination with the schemes that we developed on those areas. As we're doing those winter drawdowns, we're kind of seeing those benefits across the years. We've got an outline design for what we would do to make those changes at those reservoirs to make it a more efficient process. At the moment, I think there's just one individual from Yorkshire Water who goes around during the winter months and opens the scour valves to kind of keep that option. So the idea of that project is that we would formalise that and put in new engineering solutions, make some changes to the overflow weirs to make it more effective. As Adam says, the big thing now is to kind of understand this yield analysis, get that resource on that, so we can understand kind of the longer term costs of what the solution would be, but also the longer term impact on those water resource elements. That's what we're waiting for on this project. I think once we kind of have that done and understand that, then we can push these projects further forward again.
That's helpful, Christian. Thank you, Councillor Lee.
Thank you, Chair. Just wanted to come back on the reservoirs, if I may, very briefly. It's been said many times, we've all heard it many times, that the duty of Yorkshire Water and the water companies is to provide water to customers. And the problem that we have with the water companies, and I don't discount any of them in this, so I'm sure it applies to Yorkshire Water as much as anybody else, is that the resistance to looking at the reservoir part solution is not being viewed favourably because there's a greater need to keep the levels higher because of the massive loss of water through the pipelines. And I mean massive loss. So if it's all being wasted and leaking away, then naturally the reservoirs have to stay at a higher level to counterbalance that. And if there wasn't such terrible leakages in the system, then we could look at mitigating flooding by lowering the levels of the reservoirs. And that's the real reason that we don't make any progress with this. And I do know something about big pipelines, and I know that the pipeline system is absolutely failing. And so we've got a lack of investment here. Everybody's heard about it nationally, but it's affecting us in Calderdale. And the answers that I'm getting are unacceptable. We need to fix the pipes, and we need to get our act together and stop dumping sewage. And that will help us do some of the good work well, enhance the good work that the Enterprise Agency are trying to do. But it's like fighting, you know, a very big, massive industry here. And it's easy to see why the progress is so poor. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I think you meant Environment Agency rather than Enterprise Agency there, Steve, but those points are noted.
Yes, I did. I'm sorry.
Yes, thank you. Councillor Patient, last word on this topic, please.
Thank you, Chair, and really want to endorse Councillor Lee's comments, and I think he's made a very good pitch there for why privatisation has been problematic and why a nationalised approach to utilities would be the way to go.
Right, well, we're not going to get into those national debates here at this local committee. I'm just going to give Adam a very brief opportunity to come back. Not expecting you necessarily to enter the national political debate on this. Adam, any last thing to say?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, yeah, I'm not to enter that debate. Just in terms of the reservoir levels. So my understanding is we have reduced the reservoir levels, and we'll continue to look to do that because that does offer the flood benefit. I think the plan here is to continue to support this as a partnership to make sure that we look at how to deliver the best set of outcomes, and reducing the reservoir levels is part of that. And we do continue to reduce leakage and fix pipes. That's a core activity of Yorkshire Water, and there's multiple things we're looking to do, but they are both firmly at the heart of what we do. And that was all I wanted to add. Thank you.
And I'm sure you will note the various points that have been made and take those back to others in the organisation. Thank you. Okay, thank you again for that very comprehensive report, Paul. If members are content, we will note that report and move on to report from the highlights report from partnership operational groups. So the first one of those is community resilience. And I think, is that you, Katie, Councillor Kimber?
It is, thank you, Chair.
In your other role?
In my other role. I'm wearing many hats, so yeah, I'll do 2 hats today. Okay, so I'll do this really briefly because some of it is overlapping from the last report, which are ongoing things. Firstly, to mention around flood warnings and alerts and forecasting, we're still getting reports back from the community about drop off in those alerts, so they're not wanting to be signed up anymore just because sometimes the sporadic nature of them. So many of us on this group will understand that and the reasoning behind that and why those alerts come out at times, but it's how we communicate that to the community. So that's an ongoing issue that comes up within the flood networks and the community and the flood wardens. So we've done an overhaul of our community resilience actions, and we've streamlined them and really focused down on some of those actions. That is going to be ongoing. We're going to keep doing that within the group, just to make sure that we are keeping an eye on those, but mainly those business as usual actions that should just be happening. So we're just keeping an eye on those. We've had some introduction of actions that we're going to look at, which have come from the NFM Ops group, and they closely relate to the community. So I've listed those out in the report there so you can have a look at those. So those are discussions that we're going to have around in the next meeting about how those fit into the community resilience actions, and just see how that goes really, and just whether we can get those down into the community resilience action plan, and whether they're appropriate to be in there. So we'll go back to the group for discussion. Some of the milestones. So we have had a look at the S19 report from February 2020, and there are a couple of things in there that we need to bring back into our group and to have a look at, and they were in sections 5 and 6 of the report, and their recommendations that we need to look at around the flood siren, around flood wardens and communications. Then we were really pleased to see some action around the property flood resilience, which will probably come up in the comms report, around the Be Flood Smart campaign, which was in partnership with the Environment Agency. And that was encouraging the Build Back Better scheme after flood, but also about the need for checking your flood resilience measures. And this is going to become more important, as we've seen from Paul's report on the Errington scheme, that some of those options there will be around property flood resilience and how the community manages those options and keeps an eye on them and make sure they're functioning as should be. It's not really much more to say, really. We were pleased to see that emergency planning are going to be doing an exercise day in the autumn, which I'll be involved in. And as we know, that is really important for Calderdale, that we're all working in partnership and understanding what happens before, during and after flooding. And we'll continue to link up with the communications team on amplifying messages around preparedness and resilience for the community. So that is a whistle-stop tour. The report's there that you can ask any questions or make any recommendations. Thank you.
Thank you, Katie. Interested to hear what you say in terms of notifications and alerts, and of course the date of the 28th of September was mentioned for the flood siren testing. Very, very important. However, I just wondered if your group had discussed at all, and maybe Paul wants to come in here as well, the generalized text alert experiment that was done, and whether you felt that sort of added to the current system of signing up for the warnings. And I know that not everybody got that, but whether there has been any discussion of that, and whether indeed we know whether the government are planning to extend that, have another test. I'm just looking around for information. Have you discussed it in the community resilience group at all?
No, I don't think we did. So within some of the flood warden groups discussed it, but we didn't actually bring it into the community resilience group. So that is a really good point, and Chair, and I will make sure to put that on the agenda for the next meeting, because just within the flood warden network, it was apparent that lots of people didn't get it, or it arrived quite late for people, so it wasn't the big bang that we were expecting. So yeah, that's a really good point, that, and I'd be interested to hear from Paul if he's got any updates on that.
I think one of the reasons we were interested in that test was that I think we have got very good at communications and alerts in areas that frequently flood. But of course, we know, because of the arterial nature of the valley roads, that people may well be passing through who wouldn't actually have those sort of alerts. And that was useful, certainly for us in this part of the region, in relation to that. Paul, do you have any further information on alerts?
The only, well, from my understanding, which is fairly basic, from a flood incident perspective, we would only issue, and Christian, you might be able to back me up on this or tell me if I'm talking nonsense, but using that emergency alert system, we would only use it when it's a severe flood warning, I understand. So anything, severe flood warning only. So if it's a road flooding, or Callis Bridge road flooding, for example, the road flooding at Callis, I don't think we would use it for that. We certainly wouldn't use it for issuing a flood alert across the valley or specific flood warning. But yeah, as far as I understand, it's severe flood warning only. But I can find out more if that would help, unless Christian can back me up or shed any further light.
No, I think you're right, Paul. I don't have anything about this one.
Thank you. Some of us think perhaps, what happens once the flooding happens on the railway at Callis Bridge and the road is closed, and we're cut off in Calderdale. Maybe it should be a national alert. Councillor Patient, Scott.
Yeah, thank you. And it's I guess it's quite apt that you brought that up, because I know flood wardens over the years have been, back when Fraser Rhodes used to work for the Environment Agency digital team, he was at that point developing a localized text alert sort of process that could be hyper focused towards communities, perhaps with a less focus towards severe flooding and more sort of tiered approach. But I know DEFRA in their wisdom sort of tanked that project, and we've moved towards this more sort of nationalised one. I do think though there probably is an appetite, like locally, to hear about what came out of that and how that could be applied to frequently flooded communities like ours. So I'll be watching that with a watchful eye, and hopefully come to the next CROG if you manage to get that on the agenda.
Okay, thank you for that, and certainly worth keeping an eye really on the interaction between what we do locally and regionally and some of that national emergency alert picture. I don't see any other hands in terms of questions on Katie's report. So I wonder if we could go on to the second report, which is on the NFM, the Natural Flood Management. Adam, is that you?
That's actually me.
Oh, it's Ben. Beg your pardon.
That's right. Hi, everyone. I'm Ben Fenton. I am the Natural Flood Management Project Officer at Calderdale Council. I'm going to run through the report, and any questions you've got, you can feed them me at the end.
Ben, sorry to interrupt. Do you think you could just speak up a little or speak more closely into the microphone? Sure. You're sounding slightly distant.
I can indeed. My face might be larger, but that's okay. How's that? Is that better?
That is better.
Fantastic. So we've recently done a flood action plan workshop at the NFM operations group, introducing new actions such as those that were mentioned by Councillor Kimber, and then prioritising which actions we want to take forwards by funding them as part of the new priority action grants. That's another grant scheme that I manage, and it's funded things like the wildfire and moorland resilience report that was done by Moors for the Future last year. Big news at the moment is Calderdale Council are doing a joint bid with Kirklees to the landscape recovery scheme, and this is has potential to be a huge amount of money for landscape recovery projects. We're being assisted by Adrian Barraclough, who some of you will know, AKB Environmental, and we're looking at a large-scale project focusing on the uplands, I think, at the present time. We're working on that over the next couple of months, and then we hope to submit that in mid-September. And that will be for several years of seed funding, as it were, to develop a larger project. Another exciting project is the ART as Natural Flood Management Project. Some of you will be pleased to hear that that's been part funded by the Henry Moore Foundation, and that's to put a piece of art by Andy Goldsworthy at Hardcastle Crags, and that piece of art will act as natural flood management. So there's plenty of other funding bids going in to reach the full budget for that, but we hope to get that in place in next year. Tying in with Calderdale as well, the Year of Culture 2024. Another good news story is Pecketwell Mill, which you may be aware of, above Hebden Bridge. It flooded in 2015. 7 properties there flooded. Excuse me. And those properties have pooled their property flood resilience grants to create some natural flood management, and that's been a long process getting that to the stage that it's at now, but it's all ready to go. So that those properties will be getting a natural flood management scheme above their properties, which will aims to protect them.
Oh dear. I fear that Ben has frozen, actually. Let's give it a minute and see if he can come back.
Front read on that on the Slow the Flow website. Okay. The next thing to report on is an ongoing drive to reduce the barriers in NFM, trying to reduce the paperwork, the consents needed. So we're trying to review the ordinary watercourse consent process at the moment, working with a JVA contractor to try and streamline that as much as possible and make it easier for low impact NFM to get done rather than going through a long, lengthy consenting process. Leading on to the landowner grant scheme, which is a grant scheme that I manage that we give out in partnership with the Environment Agency. We give out funding to landowners, farmers to implement NFM on their land, natural flood management on their land. That project is the latest round of projects is going really well. Lots of support from project management from partners such as the Calder Rivers Trust, Forestry, and Blackburn as well. So they're delivering the projects on behalf of the landowners, which means a lot smoother, quicker turnaround this round, which is really great news. So all those projects are expected to be completed by June 2024.
Thank you, Ben.
There's one more thing I would like to report on, and that's the some of you have heard about the Sheep's Wool Dams project, which I was looking at. That's using sheep's wool, which is pretty much a waste product these days. It costs more to take it off the sheep than it does to sell. So I was looking at using that, which has been done elsewhere in Yorkshire, to create small moorland restoration grip blocking ditches with it. It will be in a sausage form, such as like a coir roll, but instead of coir, it would be filled with sheep's wool, because sheep's wool is from Yorkshire rather than bringing coir from wherever coconuts grow. But unfortunately, we have found out recently that this project is not going to go much further because, unfortunately, the peat breaks down the wool quite quickly, and the pollutants are released from the wool. I think lanolin, as you all know, all have heard of, is released from the wool, which means further consents required. So that project is not going to be the quick and cheap NFM project that I was hoping to be, but will increase further red tape, which is why we're not going to progress that one at this stage.
Who'd have thought? Thank you, Ben. Thank you for that. Katie, I'm going to ask you to hold off for a moment just to check whether there's any actual members of the committee who've got questions for Ben before I bring you in. Not seeing MD, and I'm really sorry to hear about the sheep's wool. It had a pleasing circularity, and I'm sorry about that lanolin and so on. But actually, it is part of managing flooding is very much about doing those experiments and doing things we haven't done before and learning from that. I'm going to bring Councillor Holdsworth in. Sue.
Oh, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask Ben whether or not they'd looked at scouring the sheep's wool before actually rolling it into tubes, and that would cleanse the lanolin from it.
Thank you, Sue. Ben.
Good question. We have looked at washing it. I don't know what scouring it entails actually, but we've looked at washing it, but in other places that's not been as effective as it needs to be.
Okay, sorry, scouring's pretty well just that. It's washing it and cleansing the wool to take the lanolin out, so you can then weave with it.
Right, okay, that's really
and spin it.
I'll look into that more.
Thank you. No, it sounds a good project.
Yeah, you do prompt me to think about contacts I have through the LEP and some of our local woolen mills in West Yorkshire that particularly make military and royal uniforms, and who have got a supply exactly, and who've got processes. And we still have in West Yorkshire, fortunately, some high quality woolen mills that are engaging in different processes. So definitely worth a conversation offline and just see if we can join things up. Thank you. I'm going to bring Councillor Kimber in here.
Thank you, Chair. Just a quick one on the combined residence landowner grant. I think we need to do more of that, of communication around that, of what people can do. I haven't looked at your new page on Iron Calderdale, so it may already say this, Ben, but just it's been done before, hasn't it, after 2015, where residents pooled grants together, flood resilience grants together rather than the NFM grants. But just it opens up the opportunities to people, doesn't it, if they know that they can pool that and do a combined effort. And I just thought it should be better publicised, really, that's an option with those grants. It may already be there, so don't shoot me down. Thank you.
Thank you. One for Ben to note and take away. And it also does lead us very nicely, actually, into the communications, right? Communications infrastructure. Lauren, is that you?
Yes, that is. Good morning, everyone. So just a few highlights on our report. So I wanted to remind everyone that the Iron Calderdale website, although the new launch happened, we are ongoing reviewing that. So please, if you have any feedback, like what Katie's just said, we can use the Iron Calderdale. It's very much there as a tool for our partners to use. With regards to be prepared messages, flood resilience around summer flooding and flash flooding, a press release went out yesterday, and we'll be doing some social media posts on that over the next few days. I've just looked at the weather report and it looks a bit grim for the weekend. And then moorland fires, which I know has been discussed as well. So Janine and I have confirmed a guest speaker from National Trust to just come speak at our flood comms subgroup that we host, just to make sure that we're all communicating together. And then I've also jotted down that I'll speak to Debbie at the EA regarding comms with the Burnley Road Primary School. It might be a good opportunity to get a photographer out there over August. So I've made a note of that, and I've also made a note of Katie's request regarding pooling grants and how we can communicate that better as well. I think that's all.
Thank you. Any questions from Lauren's report? No, not seeing them to indicate. We'll move on then to resilient infrastructure. And I think Adrian Gill is on leave this week, so I'm not sure who's giving that. Ben, you're in the
me again, actually. I'm not very involved with many of these projects, so I will not be able to answer questions very well, but I'm happy to take any of those questions away and report back. Excuse me. So in regards to flood and drainage defect investigations, in the last period between April and June, 71 flood incidences and land drainage issues have been reported, which takes us up to 89 investigations ongoing, and progress has been made on a lot of those, with 17 still requiring a site visit by one of our engineers. Moving on to telemetry. I'm glad I said that right.
Yes.
So work has been done to install additional cameras and flow monitoring at 10 sites. And this information is being shared with the Environment Agency. So that's cameras so we can remotely look at the amount of water in the system from our desktop computers. Moving on to, there's a lot of partner updates within this report, which I think a lot of these have been covered. Paul Swales covered a lot of the information within this report. So I'll leave that. I'll jump over that bit, and I'll allow you to take a look at the report if that is of interest to you all.
Thank you. Members had the written report about the extensive and ongoing work that the team have been doing. Any particular questions, anything you want to raise for Ben to take away for the team? No, not hearing anything. Thank you. Look forward to further reduction in the number of reports coming in and further completion of the individual bits of work. It's never ending. It's like housework, flood work, isn't it? You clear a trash screen and then you have to do the work all over again. If I could move on then, members, with your permission, to number 7, and a regional Yorkshire and Humberside Regional Flood and Coastal Committee update. And that's Councillor Kimber in your councillor role, Katie.
It is, thank you, Chair. Okay, first to mention that our Chair today and Leader of the Council, Jane, was thanked for her time at the beginning of the meeting and valuable support on the committee, and that she'll be sadly missed. And I hope that I can fill her very big shoes, or not so big shoes because you're only small, Jane, but big shoes in terms of work. So we started the meeting with around climate change and the ever-increasing effects of climate change and how we'd be lucky to keep below 2.5%, never mind 1.5%. So that was quite an opener to the meeting. So what I've done is I've picked out some of the main points. As some of you know, in this meeting, it's a very large meeting, so I've picked out a few bits, and I think once the papers are online, you'll be able to read them for yourself. So we focused in on carbon reduction, net zero, nature-based solutions, and the increasing threat of surface water. So we had an interesting discussion on how we require a more holistic approach to key challenges. And an example of this was linking climate change with climate consequence and how different approaches to flood and coastal erosion can support the EA's net zero ambitions. So in some respects, there may be tensions between striving for better protection and resilience with the aspirations for carbon reduction. Nature-based solutions were high on the agenda, which I was pleased to see, and they have a high profile nationally at the moment as well. There's a need for more creativity and flex, and we have to respect that even though there is a focus on nature-based solutions, it's a balance and it's not a panacea, and it often complements hard engineers' schemes. And as we know here in Calderdale, it's a multi-approach model to future flood resilience, and it's all part of the package. Both DEFRA and the EA are keen to expand local leadership and capacity to increase the use of nature-based solutions to enhance flood and coast resilience and nature recovery. So as we know, nature-based solutions have multiple benefits in addition to flood resilience. So new habitats, enhancing water quality, recreational assets, as we see with what our Brayley Fields project will be. Carbon sequestration, I hope I've said that right, all of which should be factored into calculations about benefits and cost ratios. So we looked at net zero, and in broad terms, it was cited that there's 4 approaches that enable flood risk management to support the achievement of net zero. So these are with decreasing levels of potential impact. Build nothing, focusing on the root cause and exploring alternative approaches to achieve desired outcomes. And that would be relying more on strategies for adaptation and resilience. Or we could build less, which is maximise use of existing assets to reduce the need for new ones, making more extensive use of nature-based solutions. Build clever, using low carbon materials and minimising resource consumption through delivery options. Or build efficiently, new construction technologies and waste minimisation. Then we moved on to surface water flooding, which, as we know here, we're at increasing threat of, as many areas are, as we see an increase in the intensity of localised storms. It's important to mention at this point that the West Yorkshire Flood Innovation Programme, which I'm also a part of, are developing a warning system for surface water flooding, which I'm really keen on following. I think it's very much needed. We know that we have a fluvial mechanism for alerting people, but really surface water is becoming one of those really big threats for us, and it's so very localized. So I was really interested to keep an eye on that. And that's about it, really. It's obviously that's not it. It's a massive meeting with lots of information. I've just picked out some key things now. Once the reports are publicised, I think it's really important that you have a look through what's going on all across Yorkshire, really. That includes West Yorkshire and what the whole of Yorkshire are doing to help with flood resilience, and it was really interesting, and I'm really pleased to be on that committee. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Katie. Councillor Patience?
Yeah, thank you, and thanks for the report. It's really good to hear nature-based solutions getting front and centre star showing at the moment. And I wondered, you sort of made brief reference to Brearley Fields, but I wonder, hearing that DEFRA has put around £7.4 million worth of funding into landmark nature projects in terms of rewilding and wetlands, is that something that the committee are thinking about? Because clearly Natural England are in support of that and have led some of these projects, some of which are nearby to us in Great Manchester and Tees Valley and stuff. But interestingly, I think what we want to do is make sure that we're working with nature to do projects like that we know manage flooding, improve carbon stores, and build diverse habitats for us. So there's a real balance, isn't there, in the work that we're doing in terms of house building and making sure that we do that, but also really making sure that our resilience, especially in boroughs like Calderdale, maximises what we can do here.
Yes, thank you.
I'll come back to you on that, Scott.
Yes, and just add in, Katie won't know that Oliver Harmer, who was with the Environment Agency, has in fact moved to Natural England, and I had a conversation with him yesterday, making those points very strongly, really, and we left things in terms of let's look at ways that we can work together across the South Pennines, but particularly in Calderdale, and looking at exactly those issues, actually, of linking nature recovery into some of the challenges that we have in Calderdale around water management and flooding. Thank you. Thank you, Katie. I'm sure shoes will be filled and indeed surpassed. Thank you very much for that. I think that brings us to the end, nearly the end of the formal bit of the agenda. Question time. I don't think we have any members of the public who've indicated they want to ask questions. Diane, can you?
No, Chair, we've received nothing in writing or by email. We've had no questions at all for this meeting.
And that's actually quite, in some ways, an indication that things are quieter at the moment, because we do get them when there are lots of events. But nonetheless, I think it's important, as this meeting tells people who are watching, that there is a lot going on behind the scenes, really, and that there are a number of agencies and partnership agencies working together to make sure that people are safe and that we take a long-term view in terms of managing the challenges of climate change. So thank you all very much for your attendance. Thank you for your contributions. I think, Paul, you want to come in just for a very last point? Yeah,
thank you, Councillor. Just wanted to come back to you on the Brighouse queries that you mentioned around the town board and the Friends of Wellow Park. So Joe and the project team are liaising with the town board, and there isn't a Friends of Wellow Park apparently, but there's a gentleman, I believe, who's trying to set one up, and Joe's liaising with him. So it's on their radar, and they're making active communications.
I thought there was, and I think a chap who's on the Brighouse Town Board called Malcolm Silkstone was very involved. I may have got that slightly garbled in the transmission. So thank you for that. Very responsive. That's what we like the Environment Agency to be. And, thank you all, and enjoy the rest of the day. Bye for now.
Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks, Chair. Bye-bye.
Thank you.